But let me say it again on this last part 5 of this sermon series. Jesus wants you to flourish. As we have looked at the 5 practices for fruitful living, that's the key theme that holds all of these messages together. Jesus wants you to flourish, to have a fruitful and abundant life that he came to give you. He tells us that in John chapter 15, verse 5 and 8. You can follow along. Let me read. I'm the vine, Jesus says, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. Jesus wants you to flourish. He wanted his disciples in the first century to flourish. So as he spent time with them over the course of the 3 years, he established practices that they learned to follow that help them flourish as disciples. He has given us as well practices in the 21st century that we can follow so that we can flourish. Practices that open our hearts to God, practices that help us return God's love to him, practices that give our life meaning and relationship and contribution to the world. We started talking about radical hospitality. That simply means opening our hearts to God, welcoming God into our lives so that God can change us. We talked about passionate worship, which is returning the love we receive from God to God, both in public and private worship. We've talked about intentional faith development. That means having a plan to grow and deepen our faith in relationship to God. Last week we talked about risk-taking, mission, and service. When all of these things are true of us, we begin to sense God's call to become involved with other people. We recognize God, we become more able to recognize God's call in our lives and more willing to answer God's call to make a difference in the lives of people around us. At some point, then, in following Christ, we realize that all we have and all we are comes from God. So we're going to talk about extravagant generosity today, and we're going to figure out what that's all about and how we can develop practices in our lives to become extravagantly generous. Okay? Let's review what a practice is. This is now the 5th time for doing this, so can anybody tell me? Well, it's right up there, right? Okay. Don's always on the ball. A practice is an active behavior that we use in our lives that we deepen and we practice regularly in order to ingrain something in our lives, a habit, for example. We've talked about gymnasts. We've talked about what other examples have we? Baseball. Last week we talked about the practice the Rashes have of eating meals together on a regular basis and leaving the television off and talking to each other, and how that practice has enhanced their 50 years of marriage. Golfing is another practice. When you start to play golf as a young person, or even if you start to play as an older person, you have to practice the fundamentals of the game. How you grasp the club, how you address the ball, how you take a backswing and how you hit a tee shot, how you hit a shot off the grass when you're heading toward the hole. The short game, how to chip, how to putt. All of those things you have to learn and you practice. And Tiger Woods does the same thing. Even though he is extremely advanced in the game and probably has made more money than anybody else at the game. He practices the same thing day in and day out that a new player does. It's not as if a practice is something that you do once and you master and you move on to something else. No, it's something that you have to practice on a regular basis. And it's not something that somebody has the ability to do and other people don't. You can start a practice at any time and at any point, and it will change your life. Let me read the verse which is the basis for our looking at extravagant generosity. Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians 9, 8 through 11. He's writing to a very stubborn church, church at Corinth. He's written quite a number of letters with them. They have a lot of questions for him that he answers, but it's a church that he doesn't always have the best relationship with. But it's a church that he's very straightforward with. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and 9, he talks a lot about extravagant generosity. 9, 8 through 11 is this. God can pour on the blessings in astonishing ways so that you're ready for anything and everything, more than just ready to do what needs to be done. As one psalmist puts it, he throws caution to the winds, giving to the needy in reckless abandon. His right-living, right-giving ways never run out, never wear out. This most generous God, who gives seed to the farmer that becomes bread for your meals, is more than extravagant with you. He gives you something you can then give away, which grows into full-formed lives, robust in God, wealthy in every way, so that you can be generous in every way, producing with us great praise to God. As far as I am aware, there are no stories in Scripture that tell of people living God's way while fostering a greedy, self-centered, self-serving attitude. What I see is the lesson that knowing God leads to generosity. These practices have a trajectory. They all fit together. They all move us from knowing God to being radically hospitable, to worshiping passionately, to growing faithfully, to serving boldly, and to giving extravagantly.